this bad lighting.
Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So excited that you all have joined us today for this amazing panel. My name is Mariam Mo Abdullah, and my pronouns are she, her. And I am the founder of Culture Energized, where we do interactive, fundamental diversity, equity, and inclusion training and consulting for a variety of different companies that are kind of just starting their DEI journey. So I have these conversations all the time with different organizations and companies that are passionate about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. But today we have a special treat because we have amazing guests from all over the country that bring a refreshing and expertise and a lot of great stories to kind of how they are continuing on this lifelong journey through their organizations and through their teams. And so I'm really, really excited to have this amazing panel today. In a second, I'm going to have them introduce themselves, come up on stage, and introduce themselves a little bit so you all can get to know the guests that we have. And just so everyone knows, today our panel discussion is around the hustle. Is it dying? And how do we create a vibrant culture of belonging? So I am going to start off by passing the mic to Jessie from Coca-Cola, because you're first on the screen. Take it away, Jessie.
Great. Hey, everybody. I'm Jessie Kendall. My pronouns are she, her. I am a senior strategy orchestration manager at Coca-Cola. Essentially, that means I'm an to make a little more sense to those outside of Coke. And I'm also the LGBTQ plus allies inclusion network communication lead. Very happy to be here today.
Thank you, Jessie. We're going to pass it off to Aiden.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Aiden, he, him pronouns. I'm the author of the book, The Spineless Porcupine. It's a fable based on my journey as an Asian American trans man. And I am also the senior marketing manager of employer brand at Udemy, which is a global destination for learning and teaching online. I'm based here in Oakland, California, and I also do stand-up. Fun, interesting fact about me. All right. And with that, I'll pass it off.
Excuse the train. I live close to one. So hopefully we won't have too many interruptions. Let's keep it moving. We're going to pass it over to Naima.
Good morning, good afternoon, depending on when you're joining from. My name is Naima McQueen, she, her pronouns. I am the Executive Director of Alliance for Community Development. We're a nonprofit here in the Bay Area that supports small businesses and entrepreneurs from ideation to exit phase. In addition to that, I am a business educator, and I am also a management strategy and convening consultant with a focus on DEI in the finance industry, and really excited to be here with y'all today.
Thank you, Naima. And the amazing Jessie, tell us about yourself.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Jessie Martinez. I'm the founder of LSA Global. My pronouns are he and him, and we're focused on supporting and championing all Latinos in tech. So whether it's founders, startups, careers in tech, as well as capital. And I also want to give a shout out to my fellow Latino, Latinx, and Latina brethren. Happy Hispanic Heritage Month. So it kicks off today. And so shout out to them, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, thank you. All right, so you all have had a minute to kind of get well accompanied with our guest, but let's dive into this discussion, right? I think the momentum around diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging has been picking up steam for the last couple of years. It's more of a discussion. We have the acronym now that people are talking about. But let's dive into this title, right? And I'd love to hear from you all. Do we think the hustle is dying when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging? Um, or do you think that the hustle is still alive? And so let's start off with Jesse. Yeah,
Sure.
Jesse, what are your thoughts?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I kind of approached the question thinking about does the remote work hinder or help build that vibrant culture? And what really came to mind when we were talking about this was, in my opinion, to have that healthy work culture, whether it is remote or not, but even more so when it's remote, it forces us to use tools to measure employee engagement that we might not others. I think we can be really impressed with ourselves by seeing hallways full of people, hopefully saying hello to each other, seeing people at desks and in conference rooms and having well-attended functions. But that's on this. And what's the full picture of what's happening underneath, what you can observe, what's satisfaction numbers, what are your employees both on when you have a face-to-face and then when they have the safety of anonymity. I think the question team leaders need to ask themselves is really, how is work happening, and are people empowered to get work done in the best way possible? And that may be different. So I think the hustle then becomes that question of, how is that work happening and can it be done? And a tool that has been used more recently here at Coke is, asking people on a regular cadence for open and honest feedback. It's anonymous. And so people have that comfort level to say, here's my constructive feedback, but what we could do even better. Full disclosure, I have a background in consumer research and working in the consumer research industry. So I do have a bias towards it, but I really think what has happened in remote work is that it pushes companies like Coke to understand the importance of gathering feedback frequently in a safe environment, to understand what associates need to get work done, be empowered to do it, that vibrant and safe environment.
Yeah, I think that feedback part of understanding, is the hustle dying, not only with just one individual, but collectively, what is the pulse of what's happening in the organization? Aiden, I know that you are primarily remote. So what was your perspective on the title? How does it resonate with you?
I definitely think the hustle culture is dying. In the pandemic, a lot of us reevaluated our lives and priorities, and I feel like that happened in DEI, especially with the George Floyd murder and the Black Lives Matter movement. And just like, we're all taking some time to personally reflect on the hustle. Like, why are we in the rat race? And we are seeing the cracks in capitalism and the grind culture. And I've been feeling it. Like, does business truly bring more happiness and fulfillment, or is it the root of our suffering? And it's interesting because I'm definitely not alone. Like, Fortune and Business Insider have recently published articles talking about this shift away from traditional success, away from hustle and busyness, to like what Fortune article titled as Millennials Want to Live a Soft Life, and it's changing the way they work. And I like what NYU sociology professor Deirdre Royster said, that in the 1980s, people asked themselves, how do we maximize? But now in 2020s, we're asking, what's the minimal amount I need to live a sustainable life? So you're hearing all over the place, quiet quitting, lying flat, soft life. It's all saying the same thing. Like, we're moving away from a traditional definition of success, and detaching ourselves from our self-worth and our productivity from these ideas of like, I have to be hustling all the time, and we're wanting to slow down. And I'll wrap this thought with Trisha Hershey. If y'all have not heard of her, she's the founder of the NAP ministry, but she talks about rest is resistance. Like, we're seeing a deep unraveling of white supremacy and capitalism, and history tells us these systems are violent towards us. They're evil. And so, rest is pushing back and saying, we're disrupting the system that views human bodies as tools for production and labor. And we are not machines. We are actually divine creatures. So that's my thought on this topic.
Yeah, I love that too, because I think when people think about diversity, equity, inclusion, there's a level of like it's hard. And a lot of times it's because it's not already integrated in the ways that companies think that they are. And it seems like an addition, right? It's an additional implementation, extra practices and extra conversations rather than how is it integrated. So I can see why there's a level of like a fatigue and tiredness. I want to pass it to Jesse on this one because I know as a leader, you know, you sort of carry the torch in some type of way of like keeping the conversation going. What were your thoughts on the title?
Yeah, well, appreciate my fellow panelists here and what they've shared thus far. And I think the biggest thing is, people have choice, but it's more thoughtful choice today as before. So when we think about prior to the pandemic, we were in that rat race in a number of ways. And so now we have the option, right, to determine how we spend our time, who we spend it with, where we spend it, right? Because you saw the emergence of all these growing ecosystems across the US. And so you're seeing the distribution of capital as well as talent. And so there's now more access across the entire US. And so what are we building? How do we build it? Who do we build it with? Becomes even that much more important. And then ultimately, the part about just family, right? How are we grounding ourselves with family and friends as we live these different lives and have taken that reset for most of us and what we do today, and then what is that work that's being done by each of us.
Mm. Yes, thank you for sharing. This is also silent applause as well. Yeah, and I want to also loop in Naima because I think you also have a really amazing perspective around um, how you thought about this title and what sort of came up for you when you were thinking about it.
Yeah, I will offer. I thought about this title in two ways, right? The first was The Hustle is Dying, and I was like, good, I'm tired. I'm tired of hustling, right? And to what Aiden was sharing about the NAP ministry and thinking about rest and what rest looks like I'm a Black queer woman. I'm tired. You know what I'm saying? Like, and that came up for me. But what I'll also offer is that I don't think the hustle is dying. I think it's evolving. And I think it's evolving because I think that the work is deepening, right? There was a lot of rush and push and urgency around like, let's add DEI as if it was a program, right? And not a way of existing. And I think that the folks who are engaging in this work effectively, intentionally, deeply have recognized that it is a marathon. It is not a sprint. And so what are the ways in which we understand our personal values and fold how we understand diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging into our work? What does that look like from the nuanced intersections of our experiences with one another to how we are externally sharing what we say we do and what we say we want to accomplish organizationally as organizational leaders and as entrepreneurs? So I think that there's a reconciliation happening where folks are realizing it can't just be 3 trainings and we're anti-racist. That's not how that works, right? It is consistent work because as people evolve, this work is going to evolve. And I think that I am in good company with other practitioners and facilitators around this work and really working with folks who may not have target identities as part of their experience in the world and may have moved through the world with primarily a lot of agency. We're finding that building in this conversation of what it can look like to be an inclusive, diverse space is also starting with understanding that self-awareness, right? And the way in which you are creating space for folks to thrive and evolve in the workplace to begin with. So I think we're transitioning into a more long-term endeavor around how we approach this work.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And thinking about like the how we are approaching this work and where this fatigue is coming from, I think that conversation around whose responsibility is it? Where does the responsibility lie? I think we've all experienced it where there might be some voices that are more vocal than others. Um, and kind of maybe leading the charge was trying to bring trainers in for more education or trying to get different committees and ERGs together. But I know it's going to look different. So I would love to hear it from a larger perspective as Coca-Cola, as a global enterprise that, has basically branches in pretty much every country in the world. Where does the responsibility lie? Like, how does Coca-Cola go about spreading that responsibility? And then I'll pass it to someone else.
Yeah, I think this is a great way to continue on from what Naima just said. I love what you were talking about with the endeavor. It's not just a program. It's not a plug and play, a check the box. Like, this is a way of being. And to your point, Mo, especially with a company like Coke that sells products in every country. I think it's every country but two now. So we are everywhere. But I don't think an inclusive culture can lift off without leadership taking an active role in cultivating it. I think starting from a perspective of this is where we intend to grow from does come from a top-down perspective, and as the culture outside of the company changes, it's up to the leadership to keep a pulse on what's happening and say, yes, we are going to bring these things in as part of our welcoming pack of new people coming to our employees. I had a conversation with one of my coworkers that's been here at Coke for 30 plus years, and just talking about pronouns and using them. And his perspective was, hey, it's a sign of respect to do that. Like, I may not personally feel like I need it, but way of greeting someone that is an evolution of how you talk to someone. And I want to be able to talk to people younger than me. I want to talk to my grandkids, basically. and if this is what I need to understand to do it, I'm going to do that. And that's someone that's been within this ecosystem for a very long time. That said, I don't think it can flourish without the buy-in and the support from the associates. So the balances of who influences it and change that culture, I think it changes that balance and develops over time. At the start, I do think it's a commitment that leadership says this is what we're making and has data points saying we're going to measure it with a regular cadence. And a really good phrase, I think, to attach to all things DE&I is if we stop talking about it, then we stop talking about it. And DEI is just way too important to stop talking about it. So there has to be a reason to believe in the actions from leaderships for the associates to then take those actions and feed back what they expect. So it's really, I see it as a dialogue, but that balance of who leads it really changes and evolves, and it takes that feedback loop to understand how to move with the evolution, to know that you're welcoming in a place, being a place of welcome for younger associates that want to join and say, yes, this is a place for me. And that's continuing to evolve and listen to what people are asking for to build that inclusive culture.
Yeah. I mean, there's positives of the reach of Coca-Cola, and then also the challenges of just being so large, right? And having leadership sort of take the reins on that, but also like how it can get diluted as it goes down the chain with different teams, and like how do we start to manage that? So I would love to hear from Naima. I know that you are come from a different industry, and maybe a smaller team. So what does that actually look like in maybe the industry that you're in, and how do you navigate that?
Yeah, and I can from both perspectives as an organizational leader, but also as a consultant in these spaces and helping folks build this out. Our team started as myself full-time, a part-time person, and a contractor. We now functionally have a team of 8, and that's just in the last 2.5 years. So there's been a lot of there've been a lot of learning curves, right? And I consider myself knowledgeable and someone who actively works with organizations to strategize and then to apply it to an organization that you are leading. You're in it for real, right? I think what has been beneficial, what has worked really well, is that I have a deep passion for our team to feel ownership over everything that they do. We also have a smaller team, right? And so that buy-in looks really different. It means that everyone can contribute in a really equitable way, right? Like I don't make all of the decisions. We put it to the team. We decide on how we're going to make these decisions down to our core values. I mean, we've been working on our core values. That process has taken over 6 months because we have been really intentional with that time. And we're also a hybrid team. So we only do that work when we're fully together, because there's something about engaging like that body language and having presence and having space. We came up with these practices around how we engage together when we thought about, well, what is the kind of place we wanted to come to work every day? What would make us really proud, right? We love the work we do, but what's the internal work that has to happen? So I take a lot of the exercises and a lot of the strategy work that I do outside of this, and I apply it to the team, right? We do values exercises around personal values and how they fold into organizational values, and then how are we going to express that externally so that folks can hold us accountable to that? And how do we look at those values as both aspirational and lived, so that we know we've got a baseline and we know where we're going? And I think lots of times as practitioners in this space, we'll do mission, vision, values work, and folks will think that's it. But because organizations are evolving as your talent, as your people, as your culture evolves, you have to continue to revisit those things, right? We're a different organization than we were even 3 years ago. So I came in with a passion for that, and I was really lucky that I ended up with team members, staff members that were also really embedded in that. But I was honest about it when I was hiring. This is what we are looking to do. This is the hard and messy work we're looking to engage in. And I don't lie about it. It is hard and messy work, whether you are fully in this space or you're just starting to get into this space. It is messy. And so I was really clear about what were the priorities of my team, what are the values that they're coming in with, how do they like to work, who do they like to work with, did they need to be communicated to differently? I mean, down to the smallest nuances to build out to the larger scale items is how we approach this work, right? And that's not going to work for everyone, right? You have larger institutions that have offices across the country, but those offices have their own culture as well, right? So there's still an element of recognizing and understanding the nuances of the spaces that you're in. On the other side of that, in terms of the responsibility, I work with leaders. And if you're not as excited about this work around belonging and creating inclusivity for your team, they're not going to be excited about it. It has to come with you. And if you're not excited about it, we need to pause and understand why. Right? If there's something about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging that is making you freeze and pause and tap into buzzwords like efficiency and productivity, right, as a reasoning for why it's giving you pause, then we need to do some self-awareness work, because I can't work with an institution if its leadership doesn't believe in what we're doing, because all I'm doing then is setting up the rest of the team and the rest of the staff to hit a wall, right? And all that does is create disconnect, and it doesn't do the work that we say we're going to do. So I deeply believe that it starts with leadership, because that self-awareness has to be there, that championship has to be there. And I firmly believe if you don't believe in the kind of belonging that your team wants, then I have questions, right? Like I really do, because if they don't see it from you, you were the spirit of the organization they've come to, how can you expect anyone to invest in it, particularly folks who are on the fence, right? And that's often the group of folks that we have to work with, is how do we move folks over into a space of wanting to engage in belonging?
Wow, you dropping some gems over here. Dropping some gems. We love the diverse perspectives that you and Jesse just brought. But I know Jesse from the Latino Alliance, you also talked about not just leadership, but you specifically mentioned champions. You are an individual that, you're very busy, right? Like you are engaging with a lot of different people, and even when you're not in those spaces, you know that the work and the conversations are still being had, because you mentioned champions. Like, what does that mean for you? Like, what does that look like, sound like, feel like in the spaces that you're in?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and there's so much there when we think about champions, sponsors, allies, all the above, and because we are, we're doing the work on the ground and working with our Latino founders and investors. We've been doing that work for over the past 10 years, and so we have to find those champions, but we have to be very intentional, as we were saying now, because when we talk about what are our asks, right, and then these asks coming from these having these asks from these champions, it's we only have so much time during the day, during the week, during the month, during the year to really drive impact, right? And that impact, how's that impact going to affect change? How are we going to get that founder, invested in? How are we going to get that founder the tools and resources, right? How are we going to connect the right investor to the right startups, the right founders? And so I think that's one of the things, we always looking for is what is that alignment with those champions? And then, what is the lane for each of them as well. And so that we do have the correct and proper ask from each of these champions. And then at the same time, on the flip side, it's having the ability to trust your champions to be talking about you when you're not there. And so how are they sharing the work that you're doing, right? How they're supporting you? How are they evangelizing within your company, right? Who you are, what you do, and why it's important to be behind the work that we're doing.
Mm, yeah. And so I also want to bring in Aiden too, because you actually are experiencing this right now. Like, there's been so many conversations that we brought up at the beginning around, is remote work actually building belonging, right? And we had a conversation around your experience where you're remote and you probably have only gone into your physical office a few amount of times, but you were saying that like you have never felt like you belonged more in any kind of like professional working experience. And so like, what are some of the things that you are experiencing and that Udemy is doing to really push um, uh, the feeling of belonging and inclusion that you are experiencing?
Yeah, no, great question. And I have worked in tech for 9 years now, and 4 of those years I worked fully in person, and 5 of those I worked in hybrid work environments. And out of all those companies, I've felt the most inclusion and belonging here at Udemy, and I've only been in the office less than 20 times in 10 months. And I think, first of all, I want to give a lot of credit to the fact that we have an incredible belonging, equity, diversity, and inclusion team who are mostly remote, and they have created a vibrant culture of belonging. I'll give you one specific example of how I have felt belonging is, I mentioned I am a trans man, and I do deal with a lot of discrimination and a lot of emotional and mental stress and social rejection. And I'm grateful that Udemy offers modern health. They provide professional coaching to help with our emotional mental health. And like during my transition, I had a professional coach named Tony that was absolutely instrumental in helping me. And then this past March, Modern Health offered a company-wide session called Coming Together to support trans and gender diverse individuals. And it was all about educating and providing resources for colleagues to help folks like me, trans employees, friends, and loved ones feel a sense of belonging and support as a trans person. So I think those are some of the ways that I felt supported. And the other thing I'll call out is that we have a value called courageously experimental, and it means that we celebrate failures and take risks, and because we know it's part of the creative and innovative process. And that makes me feel more like safe, like it's psychological safety and knowing I can fail and I'm not going to get my hand slapped. And those are some ways I've felt it. I felt safety and belonging at Udemy.
Yes. I love that. And I love a culture that's not just like toxic positivity all the time, because I feel like, if we really keep it real, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging is not rainbows and butterflies. It's tough conversations, right? It's leaning into discomfort. It's active listening. There's intentional policy and practice making. There's debate. There's a lot of these things that need to be able to also be embraced. Conflict needs to be embraced. All of these things need to be embraced when we think about the design. So I also want to leave time for us to be able to answer some questions, maybe like 7 minutes. But I'd love to hear from each of you. Maybe if you all had like a minute to share, like what are some tangible ways or ideas that you all have been able to implement or practice around things that you have designed to help build a culture of belonging and keep this hustle, or I wouldn't even say hustle, I would just keep the energy going around DEI and B in your prospective industries. So let's start with Jesse from the Latino Alliance, Startup Alliance. Let's start with you. what is one thing that you do to help design differently with belonging in mind?
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes to mind for me is just being able to create that safe space and being able to listen and have those open and trusted and fruitful conversations, which sometimes can be tough, right? But at the end of the day, it's that collaborative spirit, and that we're here for each other, and that life is real. We all have to deal with life challenges, and so how do we work together, right, in unison, to help just each other, the person, what they're working on, whether it's startup or investor, in their journey, and so ensuring that we're there for each other, I would say.
Mm, I love that. I love that. So yeah, keeping those conversations and support,
Mhm.
right? Continuous support. Um, let's see. Let's go to Naima.
It's like you saw me jotting down my notes so I wouldn't forget.
Oh,
Um, I think similar to Jesse, those are necessary. I think I'm very big on ensuring I see my role as a leader not to maintain a staff that'll stay there for 20 years, right? That's not how the workforce works anymore. So everything I do has to be in service not only to the work we do together, but their growth, right? Like I
mm,
believe wholeheartedly that anyone that comes through these doors have to leave with different skill sets, with increase. Like if you tell me that you want more experience with budgeting, well, come on, it's budgeting season. We're gonna do it. So for any project that someone takes on, what's important for me is that I'm always asking, what does success look like for you? Because it's going to look different for everyone, right? And when you ask that, it allows someone to think about who they are and how they operate within the workspace, and really think about what would the end of a particular project. So I can figure out how to celebrate them in that space, but also because it removes the stress of failure, right? Like when Aiden was talking about courageously experimental, that's not one of our values, but I was like, yes, that's how we live. That's how I would love the team to live. Like I want us to get to a point where we can learn from that. So I do ask what success looks like for folks. And then I ask, if we're not successful, what does that look like? What does that mean for us? How are we going to address that? And a lot of it is built into how we debrief things, right? We're looking at, you know, things that were really positive about something. What insights did we glean? Where can we grow? So even just renaming, reframing how we think about failure in an industry. We're a nonprofit, but we work with small business. So like we don't sleep. We're always working. And so what does it look like to hold space so that folks can be their authentic selves and approach this work in a way that feels good to them for a common goal?
mm. Yes, yes. The professional development, those intentional, reflective. How does this feel for you? Not just, is this a win for our organization? It must be a win-win-win. A win for the individual, a win for the company, and for the communities that we are serving. Love that. Let's pass it to Aiden.
Yeah, something that we do to really create that and measure that vibrant culture and act on data is we actually have like a Belonging, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Council at Udemy, where they have representatives from all these different backgrounds, and it's led by our director, Betty Constance Wilson. And they're from all parts of our organization, like marketing, people in engineering, Turkey, India, Ireland, the US, all levels of the organization, all the way up to the CEO, to individual contributors. And the reason I'm mentioning this is like sometimes we need like those practical accountability of where did the executives connect with the Betty work. And the council is actually an advisory board for the executive team, and they create organizational accountability for all Betty efforts. So basically, this Betty council of all these folks come up with OKRs, objectives, and key results that the leadership executives are held accountable to. And I'll give you an example of one objective and key result is that we are trying to diversify. Our goal is to diversify our board members, and our CEO has committed to having 50% of our board members be female by 2025. And that's one way that the reason why I bring this up is because it creates accountability that the executives at the executive level will like implement a culture that is vibrant and gives a sense of belonging. And it also makes everyone at the company, like especially those from different backgrounds, knowing like, hey, our voice matters. We can hold leadership accountable to these objectives. So it creates like, when you feel heard, when you feel like what I said is being acted upon, it creates this like flywheel of like, okay, I feel like I'm respected, I'm heard, I feel belonging, and it creates that vibrant culture of safety.
Building in action, right? And not just more discussions, but building in a point where action will be taken, a decision will be made. I love that. I love that. Jesse.
Yeah, from a hybrid work experience, I actually think it's pushed us from an inclusion network perspective. So inclusion networks are employee resource group. Typically, when we would have programming, we were very focused on our physical location in Atlanta, Georgia. And because of the pandemic and being remote for 2+ years, it allowed us to really learn and say, oh, okay, this is how you do an event in a hybrid way or in a virtual way first, and then hybrid. So it actually, in an odd way, pushed us to be more inclusive in a way that I wouldn't have expected coming out of the pandemic, because we extended for example, our leadership team that leads our inclusion network. We have folks from South America on our team now. That previously didn't happen because we were so central focused here in Atlanta, and it's a cool company. And we do have primarily our employee groups are based in our Atlanta headquarters. However, other operating units also have their own, and those are being developed too. So it's created this culture of just connecting more so than we ever have before. So I would say that's a real positive that came out of, and is something really tangible that came out of needing to be in this hybrid space, is we always have that virtual connection, and we're connected in a way across the leadership team that we never used to before. So I think that's really exciting place to be. I think just in thinking about how your first touch points that people have with the company, and this is not a place that I think is a place that Coke can do even better. But I think for all of us, even when you're just submitting a resume for a company that you might want to work at, the words that are used in the forums tell you about their culture and what they value. And I think we all have to update and just be cognizant of every touch point that someone has with us is a representation of what we stand for, whether they're talking to you face to face or whether they're submitting something via a web form. And I think that's something that we might not have thought of before, and still lots of an ongoing, it's never something that's done. But those are the things that I think we can do to really bring that inclusivity to both our in real life and virtual world, so that everybody has the same experience when they connect with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's really tangible to like think through, what does bias look like, right? And not just at one stage of the employee life cycle, but throughout, with the initial interactions. How are we breaking down a lot of those barriers? And I think you also mentioned something that was amazing, which is the value of community. And when it comes to how do we share the responsibility across everyone's role throughout the company as well, no matter where you are. I love that. And I would also just like to throw in one more thing, is intersectionality. Designing with accessibility in mind, and understanding that people are dynamic, people are made up of a lot of different identities, and how they interact with your systems will look different. And so continuing to build with unique people in mind, and not just overarching approaches. Just know that like it's going to be a continuation of tweaking, changing, adding, getting feedback. And as a person that has a disability as well, innovation, right? So yeah, I just also like to throw that forward. But let's hear from the audience. I know that there's probably some questions coming in. So we have about 5 minutes for some questions. I will be honest, I'm not sure how to read them. But okay, I can't see. How do I can't remember
I
how
can
to
see
get to
one. I don't know if I see one. It says the
Yeah, it's in the Q&A tab.
We also have 4 directly in the session chat, so we can tag team and support each other if that's helpful.
Yes, support. Yes, Jesse.
I
Bring it back to
can
support.
answer one that's dedicated over to from the Coke perspective. It was from, I think it was from last year, where there was a LinkedIn learning piece of learning that was offered to associates, and it was a phrase that was a recommendation to be less white, and kind of how that came about. And I would say that came about because Coke is a very large company with a lot of resources. And so I think Coke likes to offer a lot of resources to their employees. So as part of that, this was offered up. I do think that it doesn't align with what Coke would typically offer up. And so because of that, I think what we're talking about here is just the importance of being intentional and very specific and have goals. I think everybody's on some point is like, you have metrics that you're trying to work towards. I love the OKRs that Aiden spoke to. I think that's amazing. So I think that's where it comes down to, and what Coke has reframed in order to provide learning to associates that are in line with our goals and values. So there is a whole team that is focused on that. So I would say and that's how we've handled it, is to say, this is so important, we do need on it, and this is how we're going to approach it. I would also say that Coke looks to our partners like Start Out beyond just having once a year financial support conversation, but they're allies that keep us connected on how we can do better. So in that type of instance, these are the types of organizations like Start Out that we would work with, be as effective as possible. We want to partner across our company, our systems, our industry, and we have supplier diversity policy that helps shapes who we choose to work with and why. So I really wanted to just use this question as an opportunity to say how much we appreciate being able to partner with Start Out to support their mission, and also help enable them to do their meaningful work and give us feedback and work to make ourselves a better company. So I think it's all part of that improved learning, and just it comes down to being intentional about it.
I love that. I love that. Is there another question in there that someone would love to take on?
Yeah, I'd love to tap into the question around what advice you could give to a leader who doesn't know where to start. Spaces like these, right? Reach out to literally anybody on this panel, tap in the chat, because I'm sure there are plenty of folks who have lots to offer in terms of conversation. I mean, really starting these conversations in community is the best way to get started, because then you're being really thoughtful about the questions you have and the spaces that you're looking to learn in, because I think that environment is a huge part of the success of how we build in diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging into any workspace.
Mm-hmm. I also like to add, as a leader, it's okay. It's okay that you don't have all the answers and know where to start. I think one of the greatest things I think Jesse mentioned is like, how do you become a champion? Like, how do you speak from the heart? How do you start to articulate what it is that you want? The vision that you have. And as you become more of a champion and getting language and speaking from the heart, and know that it may not always come out exactly how it's supposed to, but even people being able to hear your heart and where you're coming from will also help bring other people in, right? Like, you don't need to do everything yourself as a leader. That's why you can create a community around your leadership team, bringing in other voices to help provide different perspectives and help you figure out like what are some critical pain points that we are experiencing right now. What data do you have? What conversations and relationships can you lean on to help get you to a place where you have more clarity on where to start and what people are looking for? So you're not supposed to have all the answers as a leader, but you do have people around you, hopefully, that are passionate and can support you in different ways. And then, of course, there's always training. Anyone else? I know we have pretty much at time, but anyone else want to add anything? All right. Well, thank you so much to the amazing panelists. I loved hearing from each and every one of you, and I will definitely be adding you all on LinkedIn for sure. I hope that you all in the audience were able to take away some gems, and also will add these amazing individuals to your network. Reach out, see what they're doing, what events are happening, and continue to educate yourselves and have these conversations. I just want to Start Out again for hosting this amazing conference and event to bring these voices to life. I've really enjoyed this experience, and so I just want to say again a huge thank you to you all for joining us today. Yeah. Anyone else, Jesse? Is that
just
the way
waving
it's
and
done?
saying thank you. Yeah, that was the way. Thank you for your great
you.
leadership in stewarding this, and it was just great to meet all the other panelists.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks, Start Out, and feel free to reach out, and grateful to be here today with all of you.
Amazing. Well,